I am Groot. Bet you didn't know what I just said, but I just gave my entire review in 3 words. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you do it. Unfortunately, none of you understand Groot, so I'm gonna have to make this review in English, aren't I? You know the drill by now. Don't watch this video if you haven't seen Guardians of the Galaxy yet. I've had a sort of love-hate relationship with this movie in the past, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why. I think a lot of it has to do with my mood. When I first saw it in theaters, I was in a great mood because, well, it's another Marvel movie, who wouldn't be? But then I saw it again, and I don't know, maybe I was just feeling extra cynical that day because I really didn't like it the second time. And the same with the third. Again, I'm not entirely sure why. And then I saw it again when it came out on digital, and I loved it. I thought to myself, why did I dislike this movie at all? But then I saw it again, and I thought it was completely forgettable. Honestly, I'm not sure what was going on with me. I guess my views on Guardians of the Galaxy was a good meter for my mood. So I went into this movie this time on the fence, ready to embrace it, or ready for the inevitability that it would disappoint me. And you know what? I can totally see why my former self would find so many things to be cynical and nitpicky about, but this time around, I had more fun with this movie than I think I ever had in the past before. But let's get the bad out of the way so we can talk about all the good things for the rest of the video. First of all, the villains are awful. Like, they're actually horrendous. I honestly think Ronan the Accuser is my least favorite in the MCU. It's a close call between him, Malekith, and Whiplash, but oh my goodness, Lee Pace was in a completely different universe or something. For as much good as James Gunn does with this movie, and there's a lot, he does absolutely nothing for the villains, including Ronan. There's nothing written in the script that alludes to his backstory other than him being a genocidal maniac, which, well, that's compelling, isn't it? And then Lee Pace just hams it up for the entire movie, and man, Ronan is terrible. I don't know, maybe he's meant to be entertaining in some sort of sense, but I just found him so completely cringeworthy, and it was just a nightmare, quite frankly. And in seeing this movie again, you really see how far Nebula has come in the MCU, because this version of Nebula is stiff, the performance is rigid, and the character is just so boring in one note, and always screaming about something, or always mad at something. There's absolutely zero subtlety in the movie with her character. Thank goodness that Gunn and the Russos did more for her later, because she really wasn't that good at all in this movie. And on top of that, we have Jaimon Hansu playing Korath, and even Korath is acting like a cartoon video game character. He's just spitting out his lines as if he's some final Mario boss, and it's just, I don't know. I totally understand James Gunn needed to get the heroes right, and you know what? If he were to do it all over again, I would tell him to do it the exact same way, because I love the heroes in this film. But the villains, man, the villains, they really don't work. Even Thanos popping in for a little bit, I mean, it was cool to see Josh Brolin in the role for the first time, but it really did feel a little shoehorned in. And I don't know if it was just me, but every time I watch that scene, I feel like that particular set is really fake looking. Like, the rocks and the actors are clearly real, but then Thanos in the space is clearly green screen and CGI. Either way, his appearance was pretty meh. Other than that, I don't have any major complaints. One thing I did notice, which doesn't necessarily bother me per se, was that there was a ton of exposition in this film. That's totally understandable though, seeing as how you have to set up the entire universe and this whole different aspect of the MCU. Before though, I didn't realize just how much backstory was being spewed out of these characters' mouths, but little things like Yondu saying, "I saved you because you were gonna be eaten, blah blah blah," or the Collector basically stopping the entire movie to give a short trailer for Infinity War. I guess there was just a lot of information that needed to be delivered. But to Gunn's credit, his script is snappy and quick, and the actors deliver the dialogue so well that often it really doesn't matter. Other minor things, let's see, what else? The dance-off at the end feels really anticlimactic. It's funny, but it just doesn't land for me, although that may be entirely subjective. And honestly, that's about it. Because this film is so lovingly and carefully constructed that it's just a pure joyride from beginning to end. First of all, the thing that immediately separates this movie from the rest of the pack is its heart. Yeah, I know, I said in the Captain America the Winter Soldier review that film has heart, but no, I was wrong. This film really packs an emotional wallop. I was extremely surprised to see how much emotion I felt throughout this movie. Right away, as the film opens in the hospital, I was reminded of just how dark the first sequence actually was. For a space comedy, this was such a bold move that Gunn made, starting out the film on this note, and I applaud him for it tremendously. Because at the end, when his mother says, "Take my hand," I could really feel the heartstrings being pulled as I thought back to the opening scene, where his son was torn away from his mother and sent off on an adventure that maybe he just never really wanted to go on. And then with Peter and Gamora's relationship, I never really bought their romance, to be honest. I always thought it was a little superficial and forced, but for the first time, I really found myself buying into it in this movie. And that was a really pleasant surprise, because you see these two characters really trying to find a connection that they never had, and they find it in each other, finally, and it's just really nice to see. And on top of that, at the end of the film, when Groot sacrifices himself and Rocket is pleading with him, I was just so, again, pleasantly surprised to see how much that emotionally impacted me. It really was so expertly done, and you could just tell how much James Gunn cared about these characters and wanted the audience to care about these characters as well. And on that note, really, James Gunn deserves all the props for this movie. The Avengers needed 6 movies to build up to 6 characters, but James Gunn, he only needed 1 to build up to 5. And he did it so well. It's just so unbelievable how much you care about each one of these characters, and in the scene where Peter's giving his motivational speech and no one's really following his plan, but then one by one they stand up to join him, it was just such a nice little moment, and it was so important. It felt like the team had really formed at that point. Briefly touching on each character, I think Peter Quill was honestly at his best in this movie. He felt a little more confident and less buffoonish. Maybe it's just me having seen a lot of Parks and Rec lately, but I saw a complete contrast between the two characters, Peter Quill and Andy Dwyer, whereas I can kind of see a little bit of overlap in Guardians 2 and the 2 Avengers films that he was in. Gamora is probably my least favorite out of the group in this movie, as she delivers a lot of her lines through gritted teeth almost. I don't know if it was just a conscious decision that Zoe Saldana made, but she delivers each line almost like it's painful, for the most part at least. But otherwise, the character work is done great, and her relationships with each character, that's wonderful as well. And again, we get little hints here and there about her troubled upbringing with Thanos and Nebula and all of that. Speaking of great, Drax is peak Drax in this movie. He's actually the destroyer in this movie, whereas in the later films, he's just kind of the butt of all the jokes. And his sense of humor doesn't come from him being stupid like it does later, it comes from the dialogue and the lines, and I admire that most about this film. As for Rocket and Groot, well, they're always fan favorites. Who doesn't love Rocket and Groot? They're always welcome additions to any team, and you saw that with Rocket and Endgame, just how well they mesh together in other groups. They're just a fun duo. And going back to James Gunn, again, he really deserves all the credit for this movie. Every inch of this movie is covered with his fingerprints, and you can tell that this is his movie. I've said before that Iron Man was a Favreau film, and The Avengers was a Whedon film, but again, nothing compares to this being a true James Gunn movie. Speaking of which, you can't talk about Guardians of the Galaxy without talking about the music. While I don't necessarily like a lot of the choices he made in Volume 2, which is again completely subjective, almost every song he picked in this movie was pure gold. From Come and Get Your Love to Hooked on a Feeling to I Want You Back to Ain't No Mountain, I mean this soundtrack is just incredible. And I love how the music was always woven into the scenes, like playing from the Walkman. This may be even more subjective, but in most movies, I always hate when pop music comes out of nowhere and just plays in the background for no reason. Like, where is it coming from? Why all of a sudden song X? It pulls me out of the movie very rapidly, and actually that's one of the biggest problems I had with Endgame. A lot of the pop music felt random, and it came out of nowhere. But with Gunn's Guardians films, A, the music fits perfectly in the scenes, but also B, they're entirely seamlessly woven into the film, which is also known as being diegetic. The music's always coming from a source within the movie, like Peter's Walkman, and that just makes it so much more organic. And lastly, the color palette and the set design for this film just feel so rich and different. While the other MCU films may have felt a little samey, this movie feels completely different, from Morak to Xandar to even the Milano design. Everything is just so expertly crafted. And that translates to the action scenes as well, which just feel so realistic in the universe because of the way that this world was built up. The action and space battles feel so organic, and they just have a feel of fun that defines this corner of the MCU. But guys, at its heart, this isn't a movie about action or superheroes. This is really a movie about family and acceptance. And I love how James Gunn digs deep into those themes instead of shying away from them just to have a little more action. Really, the emotional core of this movie works so well because you're invested in these characters, and at the end, when they're all holding the Power Stone, you really, really feel it. Guardians of the Galaxy may not have a Winter Soldier level complex plot, but it doesn't need to. It makes up for it in spades with the excellent humor and jokes, quality action, outstanding characters, and most of all, heart. This film was a huge risk for Marvel, and if it didn't pay off, we would be seeing a very different MCU right now. But thankfully for us, not only did this film work, but it was a phenomenal success. I'm going to give Guardians of the Galaxy an A- and a 9 out of 10.
There's one more thing we need to complete the plan. That guy's eye.
Oh boy. Comment down below with your favorite member of the Guardians. Moving right along to the next MCU film, we got Age of Ultron coming up soon. This has really been fun for me to do, and I can't believe this is already the 10th episode. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to get notified of the next video. Give this video a like, and if you want to check out more, check out the videos on the screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.